The Freedom Institute for Economic, Social Justice, and People Empowerment presents The Turning Point with Reverend Dr. Wendell Anthony.
Tonight we're going to be talking to one of America's renowned pastors, a good friend and brother who comes out of a family of pastors and one that has a history of social justice and activism within the confines of our nation. And particularly, we're going to talk about the black church and its role within the struggle. A lot of folk are talking about pie in the sky when you die. I want some cake near the lake while I can take all of that. And so I'm glad to have Reverend Dr. Jamal Bryant, who is the senior pastor of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church out of Atlanta, Georgia. Jamal has been with Empowerment. He's been with the NAACP, been with a whole lot of stuff, Morehouse, Your House, Our House. And so we're just glad to have our friend and brother. So welcome to the Turning Point, Jamal.
It's an honor, it's a privilege just to be connected with you. You have been a consistent ally and remote control mentor and advisor for me for my entire public ministry. I go back to your Freedom Fund dinner days when you was wearing cowboy boots. So I'm
still wearing them, man. I ain't changed. I got a few more pair. I'm still wearing them.
All right.
Bless you, man. Jamal, you have a rich history that everybody don't know about, particularly as relates to you're a Morehouse man. That means that you came up educationally sound. You had that grounding of Dr. Benjamin Mays. He put a lot of stuff in brothers who were coming up through Morehouse. What did it mean going to Morehouse? What did it do for you?
Let me tell you what's amazing, Dr. Anthony, is several different strands of significance for me. I went to Morehouse in 1989. Mm-hmm. There was no internet. So I'd never seen Morehouse's campus a day in my life until my first day of school.
Yeah.
I only wanted to go there simply because Dr. King went there. So I got to put that there. The second part that I talk about all the time is Morehouse allowed me to come in as their first student with a GED. And so I am eternally grateful. Mm-hmm. And it shows the magnificence and the beauty of HBCUs giving young people an opportunity that are untraditional and unconventional success stories.
Well, that's good, man, because Morehouse is such an iconic institution in our nation, and obviously young men who go there come out and they're expected to do things. They're expected to make some marks, and you have certainly been a part of that. I mean, and then working with the NAACP, I think some people that know you know about that work, but a lot of people may not know about that. Say something about what you were doing with the NAACP. I know about it. It was during the era of Kwesi Mfume, who was the president of the organization. Both of y'all out of Baltimore, and you were very much right, ready, and anxious, and engaged with the NAACP. What was that like?
It was really awe-inspiring. Congressman Mfume took a chance on me. I was the youngest ever at that time National Youth and College Director of the NAACP, giving charge to some 70,000 young people across the country and college campuses. And it was a time that the NAACP was under intense scrutiny about our relevance and being able to meet another age. And so
when you hear that question of relevancy, Jamal, what's your response to that?
Yeah, I think longevity is relevancy. The fact that we're the nation's oldest, largest civil rights organization, and there were those who had niche markets like SNCC that are no longer around, who question the vitality of the NAACP, and yet we've outlived them. And so I am just grateful that I was a part of that chapter of history.
And you're a family man. I was looking at the name of your children, John, Topaz, Adore, Grace, Angel.
Yes.
It must be something
Yes.
to all those names. It must be a reason why you came up with all that.
Listen, I am just grateful that God allowed me to be fruitful and multiply. And all of my children are smarter than I am and have gone further than I have. And I'm just appreciative that the things that we take for granted right there in Detroit,
Right.
Bishop Edgar Van used to always say, what if what you don't thank him for today, you don't have access to tomorrow?
Bottom line, in terms of empowerment church, empowerment, the temple, the big house that you were a part of and that you were pastoring in Baltimore, that was a church or is a church that basically was of a particular genre, generation in terms of young people. You were noted for that. What was it about empowerment that you were trying to do and that you did in terms of young people and the kind of emphasis that you had? Because I know that that's a lot different. Empowerment is different than
Yes.
new birth. I think I can say
Yes.
that without any hesitation.
Oh, yes.
You went.
I'm going to tell this story, Dr. Anthony.
Go ahead.
You'll appreciate. I had no intentions of ever being a pastor.
Really?
I saw my life really just going into public ministry of civil rights activism in the same path of Reverend Jackson and Reverend Sharpton. That's what I really thought my life's journey would be. We were at the NAACP convention. You were there in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Right.
And President Fume caught laryngitis and couldn't give the address and asked me to do it. It was the seminal highest moment of my 27 years on the planet, 26 years on the planet. The next day, I was in the front cover of USA Today. It was a high moment in my life. I came off of the stage, Dr. Anthony, and waiting for me at the end of the bottom of the stage was the late Dick Gregory. He grabbed me by my collar and threw me up against the wall. I'd never met him a day of my life, never shaken his hand, never knew him just outside of fame and accolades. And he said to me, "Boy, you are out of order." Dr. Anthony, I'm going through my speech in my head,
right,
thinking, what did I say wrong? What did I misstep? Where did I cross the line? He says, young man, when I was your age, when Black people were in trouble, they would call on Jesus and the NAACP. He said, you are part of a generation that doesn't call on either. You are supposed to be in a church somewhere. I tell people this all the time. Dick Gregory called me into the pastorate.
Dick Gregory. Now, that's a story.
That's a story, brother.
Dick Gregory, who was not a churchman, as
not
one
a church
would know
guy
a churchman.
at all.
But he called you into the ministry.
Yeah. 9 months later, I started Empowerment Temple. And Dr. Anthony, my first Sunday, Dick Gregory came to church.
Bless his heart.
I'll never forget it as long as I live.
But see, that's the way God works.
Oh, yeah.
He works in ways that we do not understand and we cannot imagine. And he used Dick Gregory, a comedian, a social activist, one who does not use the most comfortable language to call you into the ministry. But that's the way God is. That's why we can't categorize him. We cannot marginalize him. And we cannot determine the ways in which he will effectuate. Well, I'm so glad that Dick used his commentary to call you and to get you where you were supposed to be. And now you find yourself in Empowerment Church. And then, Jamal, you have moved from Empowerment to New Birth behind Eddie Long. And I mean, that had to be and has to be a major shift. And how has that allowed you to still maintain your emphasis on social justice and dealing with equity and equal opportunity for Black folk and other folk in this nation?
Well, it is an amazing fit. Let's not forget that Atlanta is considered the epicenter, the Mecca, the birthing ground, the launching pad of the civil rights movement. So the whole environment has been ripe for me to flourish and to prosper in the gift and the assignment that God has given me. And just to walk in the shadow of Andrew Young, to be here 2 years before the transition of John Lewis and C.T. Vivian and Joseph Lowry, and be able to interface with all of them is just a blessing, and I'm just grateful to be a part.
Your first message, according to what you have said at 18, was no pain, no gain.
Yes,
Am I
sir.
correct about that?
Yes, sir.
That was the title of your first sermon, no pain, no gain.
That was my trial sermon. Yes, sir.
Well, you still talking
Paul,
about no pain, no gain.
Yeah, Paul had a thorn in his flesh. I was preaching about it, but when I preached that at 19, I hadn't lived it.
You had to what?
it was a cute idea at the time, but I have lived long enough now to really realize what that means to pray and not get the answer you want, to have to live with affliction, to find out that grace is not just a song. And so amazingly, I'm 50 now, Dr. Anthony. I preached that at 19, and I have not preached that text since.
Well, no pain, no gain, brother. I mean, bottom line.
No, sir.
You said it.
That's going to be in a glass vase in the Smithsonian.
I look at some of the sermon titles that brothers and sisters have, and that tells me something about the individuals in terms of where they be coming from, because a title, really a message title, kind of reflects in some cases where you might go, but in others it takes you in a whole different direction. But it says something about the individual that is seeding the word into the people that he or she is going to be dealing with. And, you've talked about what goes around isn't coming around. I mean, You've talked about for better or for worse.
Yes,
I'm in
sir.
these streets, starting over again.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
dealing with some heavy stuff. I mean, so those are like sermons titles reflective of the times that we're in, and what folk are actually going through in the streets. They're going through some heavy stuff, and people being able to start all over again, no matter where they have come from. How has new birth been for you? Is there a new birth for you there? I mean, did you have to change the methodology, the content, the theological approach?
Everything.
Because you went from AME to Baptist, even though God is no respecter of any denomination. He ain't got nothing to do with that. That's something that we created. But how has that been in terms of where you're trying to go and the message that you've been articulating?
It is AME, and let me add an addendum to missionary Baptist. Not just Baptist. This is missionary.
My
Baptist.
bad. Missionary Baptist. So y'all on a mission. Okay.
As a third generation AME, it has been an adjustment because I'm used to a bishop.
Yes.
Used to a different order, a level of accountability. I am not acquainted with autonomy. The shift for me is in demographics. In Baltimore, I pastored Gen X. In Atlanta, I'm pastoring baby boomers. I said to one of my deacons a while ago, this is the first time in my life I've said to one of my members, yes, ma'am. So that is the full encapsulation of my shift. But it has really put me in a position, Dr. Anthony, to realize everything I went through in my life was preparing me for this season. Right. And I'm in awesome wonder. My dad, who you know very well, and my mom, while I was in college, my dad got elected bishop in the AME church. And for those of you who don't know, when you're elected a bishop in the AME church, your first assignment is in Africa. So my parents had to live 4 years in Africa and it was my first 4 years of college. And so different than what you all watch on Greenleaf, the real financial state of a bishop is not what y'all see on television.
I understand.
And so, Dr. Anthony, my parents did not have the money for me to go to college. And so my college education was paid for by two people, Floyd Flake of Greater Allen Cathedral in New York,
yes,
and a gentleman by the name of Bishop Eddie Long. So for me to come back and serve the people who paid for my education, you talking about the serendipitous hand of God, is absolutely amazing and dizzying at the same time.
See, those are things that people don't really know about you a lot about, unless they really know you. You don't get a chance to talk about that a lot. And so I want people to know you and to know something. There are many sides to Jamal Bryant, and those are some sides we don't know. Let's talk about the church. Let's talk about where we are. I mean, you were down in Georgia not too long ago for the Ahmaud Arbery situation, the trial, the murder. And thank God we did get some modicum of justice out of that from the Deep South. A lot of us did not think it was going to happen, but God did something different. And I salute the mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, who maintained her faith, as well as the father, Marcus Arbery. And I don't forget what she said when she articulated the fact that she didn't think this was going to happen, but God is good. And she repeated that, and she thanked the people for marching, praying. Didn't have no resources, but God is good. And then we had the ministers that came to pray. You had what to me was like a kangaroo court when the attorneys talked about no black pastors in the courtroom. Want to send Jesse to an overflow room. Didn't like Al Sharpton being there. Talked about Kentucky Fried Chicken and Colonel Sanders. I mean, within the maze of that mess, justice was performed much more so than we've seen and many of us expected. And the church was a part of that. What does that say? When white folk recognize that black pastors obviously have something to say and something to do. What does that say about the church and how people might perceive it? And some people would say, well, why y'all in court? You ain't got no business doing that. Ain't got nothing to do with sick and shut in. They ain't got nothing to do with feeding poor folk and hungry folk. What you doing at a courtroom and talking about justice? Your response to that?
Number one, 92% of what Jesus did in his ministry, 92% of what Jesus did in his ministry was outside of the church. Part of our affliction is 97% of what we do now is inside the church. Jesus was present wherever there was persecution and wherever there was oppression. Let's not forget there was a woman who was caught in adultery, and they called together a hearing in order to give her capital punishment. And he's right there on the scene of the crime. Let's not forget that for his own trial, it didn't happen in a courtroom, it happened outside. And so the role and the responsibility of the church is to show up. I wanted it to be clear that very rarely, Dr. Anthony, do we have an opportunity to revisit sacred texts.
Yes.
We all know the story of the boy who was going from Jerusalem to Jericho, fell amongst thieves, was robbed, stripped, left half dead. And all of us can memorize that the preacher passed him by. I wanted to fast forward 2022 years later and say there was a boy not going from Jerusalem to Jericho, but running through Brunswick, Georgia. He was shot, he was maimed, he was killed. But I'm so grateful that over 400 pastors refused to stop what it is that the rest of the world dictated, but came to Brunswick, Georgia to take that stand. It was needed and it was necessary, and I cannot stop shouting this enough, because the Black Lives Matter movement is the very first civil rights movement for Black people in America that was not birthed out of the church and doesn't have a religious leader.
Now, what does that
And
say
so it's
about that, Jamal? Because I hear a lot of folk talking about Black Lives Matter versus the civil rights movement, and who's doing what, who's doing and which one is relevant to that degree. Expound upon that in your perception of the two. Are the two distinct? Are they one and the same? Is one more relevant and more important than the other? How should we engage that?
But both of them are needed and necessary. You opened up this discussion a few moments ago, talking about AME and Baptists. The same things that's asking, if we value King, do we still need Malcolm? The answer is absolutely yes. We had Jesse, did we need Louis Farrakhan? Absolutely. So I think it's two different paths to get us to the same destination. So I think Black Lives Matter and Historic Civil Rights Organization both have a place.
And see, people, you've heard it. People say, well, if we go back to the NAACP, y'all should change your name. You should not be the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. You should be the National Association for the Advancement of Black People, the National Association for the Advancement of African People. And because when you say colored, you're talking about everybody. And people are confused about that. I mean, I'm sure you've heard that in terms of folk espousing that kind of position.
Yeah, no, it's the same thing for AMEs. That there were those a few years ago who said it should be the African American Methodist Episcopal Church. Not just African, but I think that our ancestors were onto something, and it bespoke the time in which we were birthed out of, and our significance in this moment. The African proverb says that those who don't know their history are destined and doomed to repeat it. And so I think that the NAACP should, no tongue in cheek, stand its ground, hold on to its name, and keep focused on the same mission.
Do you think we're moving any closer towards justice in this country because of what happened in the Ahmaud Arbery case? Does that give us any new ray of hope? Is there anything that we should learn from this? Is there any promise here that we can tell our children, our young people, that all hope is not lost? Does that mean that America is getting ready to turn a corner? Have we come to a new bridge? Are we there yet?
Yeah, Nelson Mandela did something very genius once he was elected the first Black African president of South Africa. He did something that is monumental that America needs to take a sheet from, is he understood that it wasn't just about changing laws and the dismantling of apartheid. So he did something that was uncomfortable and unnerving, but so necessary. He formed the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, which allowed people to give their testimony and to share their pain and to express their trauma. America has not been able to move forward because we've never had an earnest discussion and dialogue about where it is that we are. Look at where it is that we are in this moment, that people are up in arms in 2021 about critical race theory. Look about where it is that we are, that there are those who believe that reparations shouldn't even be on the table. Look at those who still haven't raised an eyebrow, that they want to give some segment of encoding for Southern African nations, but say nothing about Norway and Sweden that have already given evidence to this latest strand. And so until America can address it, we'll never be able to move forward.
You mentioned critical race theory. Is there such a thing as critical race theory? And is that just a smokescreen for not telling the truth?
Yeah, I think it's critical race theory, but it has been diluted and twisted. What's critical is us realizing America wouldn't have an economy without Black people. America wouldn't have trade without Black people. What's critical is the acknowledgement there would be no stock market if there had not been the selling of slaves. What's critical is that there would have never been an iron belt or an automotive industry if it were not for Black people. What's critical is that there would not have been an engineering geographical layout for the nation's capital if it weren't for Black people. What's critical is America's denial of it. And America's denial of it is the same thing of those who are in denial of the vaccination. They keep denying it until they get sick from it and die themselves.
I know everybody at New Birth Missionary Baptist Church is getting vaccinated, and I know that ain't no issue down in Atlanta, I'm assuming.
Oh, it's an issue, brother. That's why we're not in the church.
So when you hear people
we're still not in, Pastor Anthony.
When you hear people talking about, they don't trust it, and with all the black doctors and scientists and researchers that have brought this thing to the table, the vaccination, and discovered the cure, I mean, it just seems to me incongruent and ridiculous that black folk, some of them, are still skeptical about taking the vaccination, and the church has a role in educating and motivating folk in that direction.
The Bible gave us the warning label that we just refuse to read. Here's what the warning label says. Your people will die from a lack of knowledge. And that is why we have such a critical role as pastors to educate our people on the value and the virtue, not just about the vaccine, but about prostate cancer, about heart disease, about environmental justice. We got to do more than turn to your neighbor, ain't he all right and won't he do it? Mm-hmm. But we got to ask the question, what will you do? Is everything really all right? And that's the space and the lane that we've got to occupy.
I want to, because you touched on it in an earlier conversation when we were talking about the variant in South Africa. I just want to play a little spot relative to a doctor and research scientist in South Africa. You may have seen it. The sister was very articulate about what's happening in South Africa with this latest strand. They put travel bans on South Africa and several Southern African nations. And the variant is in 26 countries, including the United States. But we ain't put travel bans there. Can we run that just to see what she's saying and get you to react to a segment that she has articulated?
Well, I'm pleased to say that joining me now live from Abuja is a co-chair of the African Union's Vaccine Delivery Alliance, Dr. Ayowade Alakija. Dr. Alakija, thank you for your time. Do you feel that this was inevitable in some way?
Thank you, Philippa. It was absolutely inevitable. And may I say firstly that had the first SARS-CoV virus, the one that was first identified in China last year, originated in Africa, it is now clear that the world would have locked us away and thrown away the key. There would have been no urgency to develop vaccines because it would have been expendable. Africa would have become known as the continent of COVID. What is going on right now is inevitable. It's as a result of the world's failure to vaccinate in an equitable, urgent, and speedy manner. It is as a result of hoarding by high-income countries of the world. And quite frankly, it is unacceptable. These travel bans are based in politics and not in science. It is wrong.
I hear your anger about the immediate reaction and about the lack of action beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's just hope this is a dress rehearsal that we're seeing right now with the Omicron variant and not the main event. The science, we don't know yet. What we can say about COVID, what we can say about this current variant is that the best thing that we know is that we don't know. So this is hopefully a dress rehearsal. But because until everyone is vaccinated, no one is safe. But what exactly is the global playbook on this? What are we planning to do? Are we just planning to act politically, knee-jerk reaction, so that we can satisfy those people within our countries, that we're keeping those, those unvaccinated Africans out? Why are the Africans unvaccinated? It's an outrage because we knew we were going to get here. We knew this is where the hoarding, the lack of IP waivers, the lack of cooperation on sharing tech and sharing know-how. We knew this is a crossroads that it was going to bring us to. It was going to bring us to a variant. It was going to bring us to more dangerous variants. Why are we acting surprised? Why are we locking away Africa when this virus is already on 3 continents? continents. Nobody's locking away Belgium. Nobody's locking away Israel. Why are we locking away Africa? It is wrong. And it is also time that our African leaders stand up and they find their voice. African leadership need to sit up in this moment. Our presidents need to wake up in this moment and realize that this is not business as usual. Their continent is at stake. Our lives are at stake. And we cannot allow the world to do this to us.
When I heard that and when I saw that first time, she got my blood up. And you can't hear that and not feel her passion around that to find out that in the nation of Botswana, they were asked to pay almost $30 per dose, and they wanted 500,000 doses. $30 per dose, which would run them somewhere around $15 million for the nation of Botswana, and they were had to opt out of that. And so we find this global kind of discrimination. When you heard that, what was your impression?
It was really an underscoring of the fact that racism is not local, it's global. That this is not something that's just relegated to Mississippi or West Virginia, but it's all over the world. And there's got to be a recalibration. We really deluded ourselves after the election of President Obama, thinking we were in a post-racial society. But hate groups around the world multiplied by 200%. So on the backdrop of that it set the stage for Donald Trump to get elected. And so we've got a whole lot of work to do. And that's why the diaspora has got to come together in intentionality, not just in politics, but also in economy, in terms of trade, in terms of development, in terms of agriculture, and in terms of education.
So we got a big job, and it does not stop. And it does not end on Sunday morning after 11 o'clock service.
That's when it starts.
That's when it starts. As we go forward in the few moments that we have left, and I really appreciate your taking the time to be with us, as the church goes forward, and particularly the black church, and we deal with the Black Lives Matter movement, we deal with a lot of young people who are looking at the church in various ways and who are not into church as maybe you and I and others have been, because, you know, the way I came up, you had to go to church. There wasn't no option about it. You were just there. But today we have options. And now with streaming, the pandemic has caused some of us to become at ease in Zion. We don't have to come to the building anymore. There's something to be said about being in a light community. But we can just turn on Brother Pastor Bryant on the air. We can get him. We ain't got to come to New Birth. We can lay in the bed and chill and still get him. We don't have to do that. But what do we say? Are we losing anything? Is the church on its mission? Can we do more? What do we say to really grab our folk, get them to understand that there's still a great need for God's house and God's people in terms of dealing with the issues of life? The black church has been, is today, and will be a very necessary institution. Were it not for the church, where would we be?
Yeah, that John Fitzgerald Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That's what the community is asking of the church. What are you going to do outside of sing, preach, and prophesy? Are you going to be able to serve? This is going to be a defining moment for the church, that we're not just hearers of the word, but that we are doers also. Mm-hmm. People in the community are looking to see, are our actions going to speak louder than our words? Are we waiting to take our cues from Capitol Hill? And so I think that there's getting ready to be a robust growth, a revival that is going to take place. Depression is through the roof. Anxiety is through the roof. Suicide is through the roof. Chemical codependency is through the roof. And so the church has got to go through the roof. We got to go where the need is, meet that need. And once we do that, I think that it's going to catch on fire.
We got about 5 minutes left, Brother Pastor. And again, as we look forward to that. You know, there are a lot of folk who are in the church, big churches, and I'm not calling no names. I don't do that. They speak for itself. By their fruits, you should know them. But a lot of us are emphasizing prosperity, emphasizing just making it and getting over, forgetting those who have gotten under. And I guess the challenge is, yeah, you can have a big church, but you can have a minor ministry in terms of what you're doing. And what would Jesus do? I mean, he's already given us a blueprint if we follow it. But then some folk tend to believe that unless you're doing all of the ornamental things, the decoration of the tree, that is not really the essence of the tree and the one who died on the tree. Lest we forget that. So how do we put that together? How do we, when you're laying down from your shouting, you still got to go to do some walking. And so how do we make sure our people are on that and we keep that stream flowing?
I remind young preachers all the time that Dr. King never pastored a church with more than 300 people, but he changed the world. We've got mega churches that have minor impact. And so you don't have to do it all on a large scale. Everybody goes to Walmart, but when you're in a jam, you go into the corner store.
That's right.
And so there's some value. There's some value in the corner store. And so you've got to flourish wherever it is that you are planted. My father used to always say, we got the world's best product. We are just the world's worst commercial. We got to figure out how it is that we push out the gospel. Malcolm X said, I would be a Christian if it weren't for Christians. And so it's up to us to make sure that we model what the church is and show what it is that we're doing. We're quick to talk about the negative things, where we are slow to talk about the positive attributes. And we've got to flip that narrative around.
My guest has been Reverend Dr. Jamal Bryant. And Jamal, when you coming back to Detroit, man?
As soon as you tell me to, I'm coming.
Look for invitation, man. I want to bring you to fellowship and have you to get on the ship with us and to spread some of that message. I appreciate you, brother. Stay in good health. God bless you in your ministry. And thank you so much.
Happy holidays to you and your family.
Thank you, brother.
Bless you.
Happy holiday season to you. Thank you so much.
You.
See you next time.
Right.
Our guest has been the Reverend Dr. Jamal Harrison Bryant, pastor of the New Birth Missionary Baptist Church. Thank you for joining with us here on The Turning Point. Stay with us. We'll be bringing to you informative guests like Jamal Bryant. We're going to be talking about a number of things, religion, politics, economics, education. We got a whole host of folks who we're going to bring before you. We want you to tune in and to join with us. Pose your questions and send us your comments. You can log on to the Freedom Institute for Economic, Social Justice, and People Empowerment, and you can talk to us about the Turning Point and about Freedom Institute and about any other areas that you have of concern. Thank you so much for joining with us tonight. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Wendell Anthony, pastor of Fellowship Chapel in the city of Detroit, president of Detroit Branch NAACP, and the founder of the Freedom Institute. God bless you. Stay with us. We'll see you next Thursday right here at 6 o'clock.